Well, I echo what Chris said. I think, as you know, that we are going through a series on Sundays, and hopefully you will be involved in a small group where we are exploring the aspects of life that are both light and dark. That we have a God who is in the presence of us, whether it's light or dark, whether we are fearful or joyful, right? God is present through it all. And we're learning some of that. And so our hope is that you will engage in that way on Sundays and at small group, but know that on Wednesday night at Pulse, we are going to very intentionally go through some of the inspirational sayings of Jesus, because we want to equip you in the middle of whatever you're going through to have permission to come in and be yourself, but we want you to leave with something of Jesus. Can I get an amen? So that's what we are doing. Our series is called Centered, and of course it's because of the red letter sayings of Jesus. And so we are going to be exploring all of that in our Inspired series. So here we are, right? This week we entered into Lent. For those of you who know what that practice is, I grew up Episcopal, so I'm very familiar with giving things up, like chocolate, and thinking I'm so spiritual and cool. And some of you are like, what is Lent? What are you giving up? That's really weird. But this week, it was funny, a friend of mine posted something, and so I reposted it yesterday. How many are into the Enneagram? I'm not even sure I'm saying it right. Enneagram, is that correct? Yeah. Who knows what this is, right? Yeah, we got a few people, good. So Jerry, who is one of our staff members here who does our development, shared at our staff meeting we have on Tuesday mornings, and he said, I am reading a book on numerology. And I was like, oh no, it's Enneagram. Enneagram, right? And so the word comes from two Greek words. I was going to look it up. That means 9 and written or drawn. It's 9 personality types that are talked about. And so I am not always a fan of sort of like very popular things. I resist them, right? If something like everyone's like, everyone should do it, I'm like, I'm not going to do it. But I posted something that basically was like, if you are this sort of Enneagram type, one of those 9, here is a spiritual practice for you for Lent, right? So you should go back. It's on my Facebook page. It was funny because on Monday I thought about it, and I was at a staff meeting, and I said, I think I'm a 9. And like everyone who knows Enneagram was like laughing at me, like, you're totally not a 9. And so then I had to text my friend who helped me find out what I was, because she did it with me. And she's like, that's such a 7 thing that you forgot your Enneagram number. You're a 7. You're a 7, right? I'm a 7, which is, surprise, surprise, an enthusiast. I don't know if all former high school cheerleaders are 7s, but I am, which means I am devoted to pleasure and enjoyment, check. I value wisdom, which check. I fear being deprived or unfulfilled or trapped in any way, single. My vice is, just kidding. My vice is, that's why it is, no. My vice is gluttony, check. My temptation is I'm always looking for the next thing to satisfy me. Thus my head, of course, is always in the clouds sometimes, and I can't remember things like what people told me my Enneagram number was. So again, I say I push back on these things that know you, right? Because I get a little kind of snarky about that when someone like says, oh my gosh, you have to do this thing, Myers-Briggs, whatever. And you say that and we all do it. We all know and right now, you know what your Myers-Briggs is right now as I said it. But when you hear it, you kind of go, you don't know me. You don't know my life. And then you read the description, you're like, oh, they know me. They know my life. And so for me, this Lent, what I am supposed to do is practice simplicity. Because I apparently clutter my life up with things, allegedly. Allegedly. I'm supposed to practice simplicity. And so I hope that you will join us on this Lenten journey, whether you just come on Wednesday nights, which is amazing. My hope is that you will find something, a spiritual practice, some spiritual nuggets, if you will, that will help you journey through this season as we enter into the time before Easter. We will celebrate Easter here, as well as Sunday morning, Holy Week, but we hope that you will come along for this journey. I hope that you will be inspired all over again with the teachings of Jesus. And so tonight we are centering ourselves in one of the more popular teachings of Jesus, the knock, ask, seek, and knock, yes. So I have actually for you the Orthodox Jewish Bible translation, because I thought it sort of helped us out a little more tonight, and there should be a slide of it. That is not it. That's okay. I'm going to read it. This is what it is. The Orthodox Jewish Bible. You can retain all this. It says, keep asking, and it shall be given to you. Keep searching, and you shall find. Keep knocking, and the door shall be open to you. For everyone asking receives, the one searching finds, and to the one knocking, the door will be opened. And I like that version because oftentimes we see ask, seek, and knock as maybe one-time things. But this reminds us that what Jesus is actually talking about, which are activities that are persistent, that are ongoing, that aren't one-and-done things, right? And I imagine that you've seen this famous ask, seek, and knock passage. You've probably thought about it in terms of prayer, which is not a bad thing to think about. How many have seen the images of Jesus, right, in front of doors or behind doors? Jesus is usually a white guy, right, behind a door. Or there's another white guy representing all of us, like knocking on the door of Jesus, right? All of these images of being persistent and getting through to God, right? But I think it's interesting for us to put this in context, so I will do that for you tonight. This is in the middle of what's called the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount was not one long sermon preached at one time on a mountain, although, some of us could go on and on, so it's possible. It's possible, but it's a fairly long and lengthy thing. So I think it's best described as, I like to call it a compilation, like a greatest hits of Jesus, right? Like the things that he preached about that were just put in a good compilation in Matthew, right? And so before this passage, does anyone know what comes before ask, seek, and knock? Before it is the very famous passage we use, which is do not judge, lest you will be judged. It's right there on the tip of your tongue. And afterwards, the other famous passage that we don't always get right, it's the narrow way versus the wide way, right? The way to live life, how we get through life. And so again, as always, context is important. Where we are is important. And so what does it mean for us to enter into prayer or centering ourselves on God, asking, seeking, and knocking, not individual things, but ongoing activities, to first of all be set up with this idea of what does it mean to not judge? And I'm going to help you a little bit out understanding some ways in which Jesus might have meant not judging, right? During Jesus' time, there were 3 different kinds of judgments or ways to judge, and we still have them today. Number 1 is a civil or legal system, right? That sort of judgment in a courtroom. The second is discerning, right? Judging one thing from another, right? And the third is a judgment that we make about the value of people or things or ideas, right? And so I hope on some level that you engage in 1 and 2, right? I hope you hear, do not judge, but you don't think, I can't be on a jury, right? I hope you don't hear, do not judge, and you think, I'm going to make no decisions ever, right? I'm going to make no discernible decisions ever. No. I believe that as we enter into asking, seeking, and knocking, Jesus is laying out the flip of it, which is to say, what I'm asking you not to do is to discern someone else's value. That is not your job. Your job is not to judge someone else's worth, their path, their value, who they are, put a period where God has put a question mark, right? We're all in a process, and it's not our job to judge where someone else is at, who they are, what they're doing, okay? Placing our own value judgments on people is not our job. We don't get to do that. And in fact, it goes on to say that if you do that, you have what in your eye? A log, whereas your neighbor has a speck, right? So when you do that, you have a log in your eye, which is not literal, obviously. That would be very weird. I don't know if you've seen, I've never seen paintings of that. Like, you see paintings of stills of teachings of Jesus. I never saw someone with a log in their eyes. I've never seen that. That would be weird. Not literal, just a log in your eye. But it means that once you judge someone, you no longer are in a position to see them clearly. You don't get to see them clearly anymore. You've mucked it all up. And then after this, we are asked to do something positive, which is ask, seek, and knock. And tonight, the translation I used, I judged it to be better, is keep asking, keep seeking, keep knocking. And I think that most often we think about our relationship with God, and we think about this passage in the way of thinking about prayer, right? How many have heard sermons about this passage talking about prayer, right? That makes sense, right? Asking, seeking, knocking. It is be perseverance in our relationship with God, right? Ask, seek, and knock. But I want to challenge you a little bit tonight because we are in the middle of passages that talk about how we behave with one another. Did you hear that? How we behave with one another. And I think one thing that Christians get sometimes a little off is that we somehow separate our spiritual theological lives with our personal lives and our activities. You see that happening sometimes? Where we think here's a way we behave with God, and here is a way we behave when we're in our regular life, right? Right? I can love God or speak to God, and I ask God beautiful questions, and then I'm a total jerk to my neighbor, right? Have you seen that dynamic? Just me? I think people have seen that dynamic. Right? Can you think about it? The greatest commandment that Jesus tells us is love God, full stop, that's it. Is there something else to that? Sorry. What do we do too? We love our neighbor, right? I was also thinking this week about Adam and Eve, the original story of original sin, or our original relationship with God and how we mucked it all up, right? So you have Adam and Eve, they're in this garden, they're told not to do one thing, eat from this tree of knowledge and truth and goodness and all the things that it is, and they do it, and so God comes in and smites them. Is that the story? No. He asks them questions. Dude, what happened? Why'd you do this thing, right? And then Adam turns to Eve and goes, she did it. And we inherited that weird gender stuff to this day, and we call it not electable or whatever. Anyway, it's fine. It's fine. We inherited all of that. But the truth is that even in the moments where we are understanding our relationship with God on multiple levels through Jesus, in the Garden of Eden, we are seeing a God who is concerned about us and asks questions, doesn't make assumptions about us. We are seeing a God who is concerned that the way we behave towards God in this holy manner isn't somehow different than the way we behave with our neighbor, right? And so we remind ourselves this at Cathedral of Hope. We say we love God by loving people, right? We don't love God in spite of people, although it feels like it sometimes, right? We don't say, we only love God and the heck with people. They're difficult. Sometimes they are. Those realities are intertwined, loving God and loving people. In fact, I believe that one path, loving people, leads to the other, loving God. Jesus spoke about authentic faith, faith that was lived out in both the life of community in Him and also lived out with each other. And so my challenge for you tonight to be inspired, right? No pressure that I come up for the first sermon series of inspiration. Hopefully we're inspired. The first thing that you need to think about is you center yourself on the teachings of Jesus, asking, seeking, knocking. My challenge to you is that you don't see it just as an activity you do alone with God, that you actually see it as a way for you to live your best life. Right? For you to live this way. Think about our world. Think about the world we live in. Think about our relationships, our interactions, right? We have a lot of anger, reactivity, assumptions, right, in this world. And imagine if we as a people, just in this room, practice in our daily life, asking, seeking, knocking, right? After we are challenged by Jesus to not devalue people, do not judge, we are shown the way to value people. Did you hear that? So when we say do not judge, Jesus is telling us this is not how you behave towards people. You do not get to have a value judgment of people. And so he backs it up and says, but this is the better way. This is the better way. Don't do this. Do this. I heard it was do. I get it. But we think about people in the midst of that. So think about it in your own relationships. What does asking mean? It means honoring another person, letting them speak for themselves, valuing their autonomy and free will, not making assumptions, not controlling or manipulating them, and actually listening to who they are, right? Being curious rather than assumptive. How healing would it be for those who don't feel known or understood to be approached that way by all of us, right? I don't know you. Can I ask you some questions? I want to get to know you. What does it look like for us to seek with one another? What if we really lived into a desire to want to get to know the people around us, not for what they can do for us, right? Not to amplify our own egos, to have as many friends as we can on Facebook, right? But to focus on them, to listen, yes? But to go beyond listening to what they are saying behind what they are saying, right? Not be satisfied with trite answers. If someone looks sad or upset and you say, no, but really, how are you? I really want to know. I'm not just asking because I'm supposed to. How powerful would that be, right? How healing would that be for people who are lonely or struggling? And what does it look like for us to live into knocking, keep knocking, a perseverance to stick around and not bail so easily on people, right? Hang in there and listen to them. Persevere with them. Again, not forcing ourselves on them. I love the passage because it talks about the things we do, asking, seeking, knocking. It doesn't say we knock the thing down. It says we are persistent. We just keep saying, I'm here, I'm here. When you need me, I love you. When you need me, I'm here, right? Not pushing, right? We have our own good boundaries, and we honor other people's boundaries, but reminding people gently that they have not been abandoned, right? How healing would that be for the broken and hurting in our world? What does that look like? Well, sometimes when I'm on social media, and that's maybe not the best litmus test for health, but here we are, right? We live here now, social media. Someone says something raunchy or mean or snarky or whatever, and sometimes they're trolls, and sometimes you should ignore them, and all of that good stuff, but sometimes they're generally being upset at something. What if instead you said, why do you think that? They're still mad. Oh, okay, so back me up a little bit. Like, what is behind that? Like, what are you getting at? You know, what would it look like for us to disarm some of the people in our world who are coming at us full board, right? What would it look like for us to emulate God to people? Because asking, seeking, and knocking, my friends, is not just a teaching of Jesus. It is not just the way that we pray to God, but it is the way, are you ready for it? God is to us, right? God asks. God seeks, focuses in, and God knocks gently and says, when you're ready, I'm here. When you're ready, I'm here. I'm never going to go away. When you're ready, I'm here, right? What would it look like to live in a world where we, in our good intentions and our best selves, kept asking, kept seeking, kept knocking, right? With God, with ourselves, right? That's what therapy is, isn't it? Therapy is just you asking and seeking and knocking and saying, we got to get better, right? What would it look like if we lived our lives being curious and questioning, focusing in on people to love them and knocking gently, reminding them, not only are we here, but we represent God to them for a lot of people. God is always here. Again, God does that for us. Do you hear that tonight? I want you, whenever you hear this text, ask, seek, knock, I want you to hear it, that is who God is to you. God will never, ever let you go. Did we sing that tonight? Right? God will never, ever abandon you. Whatever your feelings are, and it's okay to come and not feel like that's true, right? But we come tonight to remind ourselves that we believe and love and serve a God who keeps asking, keeps seeking, keeps knocking. And all we have to do is respond. And so our challenge tonight, and my challenge for you in this inspired series, as you center yourself this Lent into the practices that you want to have, right? I want you to live into curiosity, lean into really listening, and hang in with others, particularly those who need it. For we follow a God, my friends, who does that with us, who seeks and knocks and asks and listens and never lets us go. And also that God wants us to listen and seek and knock and find, right? And I believe in doing so, in practicing, asking, seeking, and knocking, we will meet not only one another, but we will meet God. May it be so. Amen.